Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to walk you through and talk to you guys about the 25 Plaguefall run that my squad and I completed in the last push week. We got it done in time, and I wanted to break down how we did it with Holy Priest, as well as just a lot of general healer tips that you could be using for your own groups, regardless of whether or not you're playing Holy, Disc, Shaman, whatever that it might be. Alright, so digging into it, one of the biggest things is, with how our group likes to run and with how our group likes to set ourselves up, we really try to maximize the uptime that our tank is going to be having while he's going to be just sitting in melee and going to be min-maxing that uptime for not only the fire mage but also the hunter, the rogue. Just keep everything stacked up as much as you possibly can, and that's been kind of our reaction towards some of the heavier, like, hyper paladin meta that we've been seeing in really high keys. Is that, yeah, as a Holy Priest, I can't really contribute crazy amounts of damage. Probably the closest comparison is definitely Shamans with their Earth Elemental Legendary, which is awesome, but not really anybody else is able to be cranking the big damage. But I do have the other benefit of just being able to help my tank stay in melee for pretty copious amounts of time by just dumping throughput into them. So that's going to be one of the big things for this dungeon for a couple of pulls, but I'd say Plaguefall, more than any other, is going to be really heavily focused on what your tank is going to be doing. So from the very beginning, we go in, run through, kill up all the slimes all together, and then we start going through and working off of the different Plagueborers. Plagueborers are just going to be absolutely key for this dungeon, as tank manipulation of them and just setting them up to be able to kill pretty much everything makes the biggest of differences. So we're just keeping in mind that Plagueborers are also going to be target capped, so we're just grabbing one by one, mixing them into packs of 4 or 5, and then getting their explosion along with unstable canisters and everything like that. So you're definitely going to be able to have, your DPS just pumping damage as much as they can, and of course I'm dropping PI onto our mage. But you'll pretty quickly see as we run through it that Plagueborers are really heavily focused on the tank, being able to make sure you keep your tank in there, and also just clearing diseases as rapidly as you possibly can. Keep in mind, there are some potions that you can use to clear diseases as well, so if you're getting some of the claws on you, you're getting a little bit too close to mobs or something like that, there's a way for you to cleanse yours. There's a way for your tank to also cleanse his as well. Keep in mind, it's still going to be that very punishing 5-minute cooldown if they do choose to use it. So once we do end up wrapping up all those Plagueborer pulls, we do have our first Prideful, and 25 Prideful is the scariest thing yet, as there's just a crazy amount of damage. There's not loads and loads of room for error for the side of your DPS and everything like that. The amount of HP that you have to deal with is honestly just staggering at times. So the biggest thing here is definitely going to be calling for defensives. I mean, taking advantage of what your group has around you. Make sure you have Omni CD, make sure you have, some kind of resources to track people's cooldowns, to call for their cooldowns, and really start coordinating with them. Personally, I really like calling for our mage's altar time after I him. Although on this one, I Divine Hymned pretty late, so I very quickly go from Divine Hymn into Apotheosis, and I just completely ignore the mage until he is completely done with his altar time. So I have to heal about 4 or 5 seconds extra of the 20 stack, more than I thought, but leveraging your big cooldowns like Divine Hymn are going to be absolutely key, because I have a just pure 20% healing bonus at my disposal the entire time that I have Apotheosis wings up, so that makes life a lot easier. I've been using the Night Fae with the Fae Guardians, so when it comes to Globgrog, I've actually been trying to find good times where I could leave Fae Guardians, the Guardian Fairy, on myself, get that 20% damage reduction for his stomp, and then be able to toss it back onto the tank after the fact. So I'm mixing that, Desperate Prayer, and of course the Fate Conduit for extra damage reduction. I've also been playing with more versatility lately, because I just need every little bit of extra damage that I can, or every bit of extra survivability, I should say, that I can get. We really are quite conservative on this encounter in particular. We're not trying to do too much. I've seen some groups that really try to put in some very wacky strats and not kill the little slime ads. Even when we're on this 25 environment and everything like that, yeah, every second counts, but wiping to Globgrog is never something that you want to do. So we always kill those little 3 adds. We already have hard CCs and everything like that set up to be able to deal with any of the big dudes, and we're going to be totally fine off of that. Overall, simple boss fight. Make sure that you're getting 2 dispels up once you get that stomp. Try to add extra damage when you can, and then again, don't try to do too much. Don't try to do anything too crazy. Once Globgrog's down, of course, we're going back to the Plagueborer grind, and I'll run through it quickly because our tank really definitely carries a lot of the load here. We grab one Plagueborer, we have it trigger onto another, quickly drag the other onto another group of slimes. I use Shining Force just to be able to spread everything out, so Sanguine isn't going to heal everybody. Keep a really close eye on our tank, and we pretty much just let him roll on that end. So the biggest thing about this is it kind of seems slow, where you're like, oh, we gotta kill this one mob and wait around for everything else to come around to fall into it. But with how quickly they die, it's actually really, really insane, and it makes your life a lot easier. And I was already talking about how dangerous it is to deal with any of the Pridefuls at this level, and you're pretty much going to see in just a sec how easy it is to deal with Prides once you have a bunch of exploding Plagueborers around them. So for probably the next 5 minutes of this dungeon, we're just going to be running through, manipulating Plagueborers, and once we actually do end up getting our next Pride to spawn, we're just taking advantage of the mini bosses, little Plagueborer guys, to get all those kills for us, no problem. So those things go out pretty well. We've used a couple different tactics to keep all the mobs in. It's been things like Binding Shot, Cardboard Assassins have been really nice to sort of just keep all the mobs inside the Plagueborer's fields. It's also really easy as well because the hit radius for all the enemies is actually larger than the Plagueborer field appears to be. So that helps quite a bit also. Try to watch how you can position yourself too. See if you can get some like Shining Force knocks if mobs are out of position or something like that. Try to use what knockbacks that you have at your disposal, or just generally try to position a bit better for it too. If you have any sort of stuns or just quick CCs, these Plagueborers will also spit and deal tons and tons of damage. So a couple times I'll get a quick fear onto them, but I also got to be cognizant of the fact that if I fear them out of position, then that could cause even more problems. So something to keep in mind with whichever CCs that you have. Definitely, if you can stop the spits on the tank, you're going to want to. As we're going to get ourselves closer and closer to the mini-boss onto this one, we actually skip him. And the really important thing is whenever you have to deal with Blightweaver, you want to be able to use every single Plagueborer that you possibly can. So we actually run past, we use Mind Soothe, we just get away from any of those Plagueborers, and then we just go down the hill into Ickus's room. And so then it's a simple equation of grab Plagueborers, bring it into one trash pack, let them explode, grab the next trash pack, grab the next set of Plagueborers, rinse and repeat. Right? That's going to be just the number one thing kind of going through this. And again, this is a situation where it feels slow. It feels like you're actually taking a lot of time to do it. But in reality, it's just obscenely quick. And you don't need to make anything too terribly complicated about this route, about this strategy. You just let the Plagueborers do their jobs, right? This also is going to lead us into another Prideful. This is going to be our third Prideful that we're going to have coming up. And this is the opportunity that we have to grab it, bring it on top of Blightweaver, and a bit more risky of a strategy is like keeping Blightweaver alive long enough to get one more round of Plagueborers after the fact, so that you could then bring them into the boss. That is very challenging because there's a ton of damage that goes out, both from like the Prideful as you're trying to heal it, but also kind of keep cooldowns available. So the way that we did it is we actually set it up really well. We had the Plagueborers on hand, but then our rogue died, so we weren't actually able to grab the Plagueborers, dump it into the boss, because we didn't actually have a combat res, because we had to burn them a little bit earlier in the instance, so we didn't get to sort of chain those things in together. That being said, we still got Prideful, we still got Bloodlust, we still got a whole heap of cooldowns on hand, so we get the res off, and we just get ourselves ready for this next round. For all of my like Fey Guardians and Power Infusion and everything like that, I've just been hard dumping them into our mage as consistently as I possibly can, and we just dump as much damage as we can onto Ickus and start going through the fight. Overall, just be quick with the spells onto this one. You know, we we always try to make sure somebody has a cooldown or has a potion, has extra damage on hand to be able to deal with these ads. I save my potions so that I'd be able to have it on hand for this first Plague Bomb, because that's kind of after everybody has their combust and has a lot of their big damage. So we're kind of just letting the end of Lust carry us into that next that first Plague Bomb, and then we have CDs up for the next wave onto that one. But Ickus overall, and thankfully a couple different bosses in this dungeon, are not too challenging to deal with. One big tip that I would give you guys is whenever Ickus is jumping around, really start watching his butt. No meme, whenever he jumps, he sprays out the 4 lines in different directions, and it's always going to be where he's facing and where his butt's facing, and then where his left and right arms are, of course. So watch where his butt is. That's always been the most consistent way for me to find out where I can stand. Stand to the left or right, relatively speaking, of his butt, and then you'll be able to dodge it, no problem. Now that we've gotten through all the Plagueborer wings, we're halfway through the instance at this point. There's no more easy mode. All the rest of the trash packs are actually going to hurt. They're actually going to be a challenge for us. And it kind of starts off with this big island pull that we have, which has very, very limited space around us and very little opportunity to be able to sort of run around and maneuver. So biggest thing is we all make sure we're spreading out from the very beginning. We're always pivoting, stutter stepping, and just trying to be able to get away from the sanguine puddles, as well as any of the giants, just plague spews that are coming out. If you can, really work with your team to start stopping those Defender of Many Eyes, because they do have the bulwark that's going to be able to come out. Talk to your team, rotate different stops onto those. Things like Chastise, Stuns always work great. You can use Shackle and Dead to stop them on top of that. So those are all really, really good options to be able to look for going into it. Then we start moving on to Domina Venomblade's room. And once again, this is one of those situations, I think, where it looks slow. It looks like it's not very productive, but oftentimes just playing very safely in this area is going to be your best bet. So we're just taking it one pull at a time onto these ones, focusing down snipers, letting the ambushers cast their enveloping wraps is also really, really nice, because the ambushers will actually ambush different targets, right? And with those ambushes, they just deal a ton of cleave damage to everybody around. And then, of course, you have to deal with the stealthlings, which is just using up people's CC that they could otherwise be using for stops on the defender or stops on the sniper or something like that, while they just continue to hunt everybody down. So we just prioritize it: sniper into ambusher into defender, and this also sets us up to kill the lone ambusher. And with this lone ambusher, we just want to skip it with our invis pots. We want to skip the pride that spawns out of the brood ambusher with our invis pots. It's been a bit more difficult when we did this on bursting weeks, where we precast mass dispel so that we could quickly dispel everybody and then be able to invis pot out of it. But thankfully, it's Sanguine week, so all we really had to do was just make sure that we weren't going to be stepping over Sanguine or anything like that. So we just step over it, we get our invis pots off, and then we just engage with the last trash pack, and we're chilling. So Domina Venomblade, however, can be a pretty challenging boss fight, especially considering the strategy that we use, where we do end up skipping Prideful. This is also an area where I'm petrified of getting one shot. So start of the fight, from the very, very beginning here, I just drink. They bring the boss right on top of me, so I can actually start kind of replenishing the reserves here. And this is also a great opportunity, and it's very similar to when I was talking about it in the Sanguine Depths video. If you guys check that out, if you haven't, you should check it out in the description below. And where it's all about spacing out your cooldowns and always having a backup plan, right? When it comes to Venomblade, she has her Shadow Ambush out onto this one. So very first one, I get it. I pop 2 defensives. I pop my Fade damage reduction. I pop Desperate Prayer, and I'm set. Now, kind of waiting in the wings. I've got Fey Guardians coming up around the corner. I've got Tuft coming up around, or I've already got Tuft at my disposal. So I've got one very big damage reduction, and I've got another that's going to be pretty much a cheap death, right? Same thing for me as it is for the Hunter. There's just a lot of concern over the potential to get one shot. So in this encounter, I'm holding on. Usually I just pop Fey Guardians on cooldown, but right now I'm just holding on to it. I see Karm, also a Hunter. I tell him to trust me, and I say, hey, don't pop any of your defensives. I got you on this one. He trusts me, doesn't use anything, and then I just let the Fey Guardians take care of it, right? And then in the future, he's got his other CDs that he'll have access to that he can use later on. but that's just kind of how I try to communicate with my team and say, I've got this thing coming back, I'm going to absolutely use it, and I can move it around and manipulate it however I need to. And then you start seeing, you know, the alter time with Biggie. We start kind of cycling through these defensives and be very active about calling for them as we go through that fight. So all in all, rotate those defensives, communicate with everybody as to what's going on so that you don't really have to be as aggressive on like, oh my god, somebody's dropping low, I have to really worry about them. You say, okay, it's actually going to be fine because I know they have alter, I know they have an immunity, I know they have something. Here, I almost legitimately get one shot, so I pop Guardian Spirit and I barely survive. But thankfully we do, and Domina Venomblade falls shortly thereafter, which kind of brings us to the last of the really challenging and really scary pulls, and absolutely the scariest boss to heal with Stradama. This final big pull, we have our Hunter just kind of ping left and right sides so that they're going to get all stacked up all together here, bring everything in on top of Ichor Bileflesh. And it's also going to be an extremely dangerous time for the tank because the damage scale up of these Plaguebound Devoted can just like come out of nowhere and just destroy your tank. So super aggressive with it. I got Guardian Spirit up from the very beginning. I had Fey Guardians up, and I have kind of Tuft waiting in the wings. And that's the way I usually start setting up those defensives for my tank, is to make sure I just have everything on hand, even if it means we have like a slower pull. Before that, we just take a really steady time, kill 2 mobs, wait for everybody to get their CDs ready together, and then we go in. We also have a ton of aggro on the mage, so we just let the mage do his thing, start kiting all the mobs out. I tell them, hey, just kite to the left a little bit, so they're all going to be out of Sanguine, and then we're going to kill it. And then that also brings us to one last Prideful. And I suppose that we could have also just tried to skip this Prideful, but from a personal perspective, I'm very glad that we did not, because you definitely want to have that Prideful buff going into Stradama as a healer. So it does set up quite a decent challenge for how to properly, you know, heal this without expending pretty much all of your major defensives, because brute force alone and brute healing alone isn't often enough for Stradama. You want to be able to have a good cycle of defensives on hand. Let's talk about Infectious Rain. It's very similar to how we've dealt with different bosses in Plaguefall, and just how Holy Priest plays. You're very single target focused in nature. So instead of trying to heal 5 people all at once and spreading, just whack-a-mole, 5 people across the board, I always try to find people to isolate. And I say, all right, we're going to use Cloak of Shadows first. Tsukima, a rogue Rami, I'm never going to heal because he's got Cloak. And then I give myself Fey Guardians and I say, all right, I got a defensive. Other people have a couple minor defenses. We got things like Exil. Alter Time will be available for like the next one, for example. You always have these different cooldowns on hand to be able to have sort of at your disposal. And then when we're in downtime, it's just maintaining your flash concentration. It's adding damage when you can. Something like the Malignant Spawn, of course, takes like top priority just because of the fact that it could very easily, you know, stay alive throughout an intermission phase and something like that. So at the beginning, we have Prideful, and that's like my big cooldown, and we mix it with something short, like Exil and Cloak of Shadows. And then, boom, we have Bloodlust. I'm a very big fan. I know people do it differently, but I'm a very big fan of Bloodlusting in Phase 2. And that's going to be our next round of CDs. So, you know, I've got my own Fey damage reduction, we've got Alter Time, and I'm just whack-a-moling to be able to keep other people alive. And then I start letting our mage drip down and kind of bleed out a little bit. He activates Alter, resets his health, and then we're set. So each time I'm having, you know, 2 or 3 people at maximum that I'm going to be spamming. Almost always going to be myself, and then you're able to kind of go into the next round. And this is also 3rd round. I use my Fey Guardians again. I get our mage to just ice block. I dispel myself, and we almost lose our hunter here. Comes very close to it. So I just put up the Tuft onto him as a backup, and I give him 4%. It's 3 more percent than he actually needed. And he had Tuft, so I suppose he could have died and been okay, but you know. But we're generous. You got to be generous as a healer, okay? Try not to let your guys have 0% HP or 0.1. Let them have at least 2 or 3. It'll be great. After that, one of the biggest, scariest things is trying to dodge all the aggro from these Devoted, because it's very easy to just walk right into one, have one of them punch you before you get everybody topped off, and then your run is just about over. So that's one of the biggest concerns. We also had the really big concern once we entered Phase 3 of having defensives back, and then also having people kind of get a little bit too excited and then forgetting to use their defensives or kind of using them improperly. It's always one of those things that you can kind of fall into where everyone starts like kind of cheering before the boss is dead. I think our previous 23 or 24, I ended up like just getting whacked by tentacles, and I just finished the fight in like fairy or in a Spirit of the Redemption form. So something like that is always kind of important to keep in mind, because you do have Tentacle Slam happening at the same time that you have like Infectious Rain. So we have this sort of struggle position where I'm just like trying to be able to heal everyone. Our rogue actually activates his like Bonesmith Soulbind and everything like that. We got like Cheat Death activate, and I'm just like panicking to get myself out of trouble or anything, but we get it down. And thankfully, and again, that's one of the nicest things, is that people are getting more used to cycling defensives at a rapid rate, and you have a much easier time. So that was our 25 Plaguefall run. It relied heavily on manipulating Plagueborers and then trying to dodge around some prides, but we did heal through 2 full prides. I know, 2 whole pridefuls. And we did, of course, get our time completed. So Plaguefall is a very fun dungeon to go through, but I feel like it often kind of gums up a lot of teams. If you'd like to see the full VOD, the full run of it, be sure to check it out in the description below. I've got all my highlights on my Twitch channel, and be sure to check that out, as we're going to be doing a whole bunch of PTR content, PTRM+, as well as plenty of live key pushing as well. So thank you for watching. Hope you all found it useful. If you have any questions about the dungeon or how you'd handle something as a specific healer, feel free to leave it in the comments section down below, guys. Appreciate it, you guys checking it all out. Have a great night, and I'll catch you all next time.